All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Delgado from the marketing department. So Brandon did not get a haircut. He can't be here today, so I'll be steering in his place. Aside from a change in the person driving, nothing will be different. Mr. T will go over his points, and at the end, just keep posting your comments with your questions, and at the end, we'll try to get to all of your questions. So Mr. T's ready to go, so I'll bring him on, and then we'll get started.
Hi, Sam.
Hey, Mr. T, and I'll bring you up.
Yeah, thanks for pinch hitting for Brandon there. His daughter actually has a really big academic event at her school this evening, so we gave him a pass. But Sam, you're much better looking for the record, so I think the audience wins. Faculty and staff, I've got several updates for you. I believe those were sent in the advertisement for this conversation today. Hope not to take too much of your time. We blocked an hour, but certainly if you hear information that satisfies your interest, you can feel free to step off the call. It will be recorded and published, so you can come back to it at any time, and of course share it with any of your colleagues who are unable to join us this evening. The first thing that I wanted to do was just jump right into our COVID update. This is something that I know you guys have been familiar with and following all year long as we've communicated with our board and with our community. But I want to make a few points. So if we start with the San Antonio Metro dashboard, Sam. So the point I just wanted to make here is that you can see that the San Antonio Metro dashboard is at the dark green far left of the continuum there. For every single indicator that we've been tracking all year long, they're all below the indicators suggesting that a move to normalcy is appropriate. This has been the case for now 13 consecutive weeks. And so we've had a corresponding board-approved reentry protocol. And feel free, Sam, if you could put that up really quickly. And so you can see dark green in our corresponding protocols phase 1. And if you follow that column all the way down, you can see that we're safe to reenter into school in pre-COVID conditions. So that's where we're at as a school community. We're safe to reenter and move into summer programs in a pre-COVID environment. Although we did learn a lot of lessons this year about hand hygiene for our kids and for ourselves. And those are going to be things that we continue. We also learned a whole lot about sanitization of surfaces and high touch points. Our custodians have implemented totally new procedures for daily sanitization, and we're going to continue to follow those procedures going forward. But from this day forward, we'll be, making masks, certainly appreciated, but optional. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means as we move along here. The COVID data for the district, I won't go through it all with you. Sam can pop that up, but I just want to remind you that that is been housed on our health services page. And this is something we've made available to the public since the onset of the pandemic. We track it by campus. We track it by zip code. We differentiate between positive cases of students and staff. And if you take the time to look through that, you can see where your campus landed and where the trends have been in the last 3 or 4 weeks, or 3 months for that matter. And again, it further substantiates what we're seeing here in East Central ISD, mimics what the city of San Antonio is seeing in reference to the really safe conditions that we're now living in as the vaccines have been more widely distributed. We hosted our first vaccines for 12 and over. We had a large number of students at Legacy today in receiving their vaccines. We'll continue to do that throughout the summer. And we hear every week that we're closer to 5-year-old and older vaccines. So we'll make sure that we make those accessible for all in our community. And our best numbers suggested about 80% of our faculty and staff across the district have been fully vaccinated. So we're well on our way to doing our part, and again, to reentering this summer and in the fall under normal conditions, or what feels more like what used to be normal. You all know that the governor issued an order about a week and a half ago. And in that order, the governor said that we could no longer, government entities to include schools could no longer make masks mandatory. As of June 4th, schools are not allowed to do that. Of course, as I mentioned, now that school is coming to a close, we're going to transition into summer following this order. And again, we feel like all of the science and medical data supports that move in our community. And then lastly, and this is what's most important for you guys at this point, the CDC has issued guidelines around travel. And for those of you who are going to be traveling this summer, whether for work-related travel or personal travel, the CDC wants you to know that it makes a difference if you're vaccinated or unvaccinated. And so in our community, we're going to push this chart for our students and our staff and our community to understand that while we're not going to ask you if you're vaccinated, and we're not going to require anybody to be vaccinated, we're just going to make those options available, that if in the event you're exposed or in close contact and you are not vaccinated, the rules for quarantine still apply. That's really important for employees, because as of June 1, the board's emergency medical leave as it relates to COVID comes to a close. So the option for remote teaching assignments, the option for having paid leave for up to 10 days is going to go away June 1. So if you're not vaccinated, you're in close contact or exposed beyond June 1, and you're still under contract, or as we move into the fall and you're forced to quarantine, that's on you, that's on us. And so you just need to be aware of this. If you are fully vaccinated, quarantine requirements do not apply to you if you're in close contact or exposed. So there's benefits, according to the CDC, in that regard if you choose to be vaccinated. So as I mentioned before, as it relates to travel, the CDC's guidance is also very specific as it relates to vaccines or not vaccinated. And it's referring to domestic travel. And so if you're fully vaccinated, there really are no restrictions. It's going to guide you to be thoughtful, to use hand hygiene, to think about distancing, to wear a mask in places where there's going to be large gatherings and that sort of thing. But those are just guidelines; they're not required. And upon your return from travel, there are no quarantine requirements, nor are there pre-travel and post-travel COVID test requirements. But if you are unvaccinated, then the rules change. If you're unvaccinated, the CDC is recommending strongly that you test 1 to 3 days prior to leaving, that you follow all requirements for masking during the time you're away, and then upon your return, you have to quarantine for 10 days. Now, you can return if you have a negative test between 5 and 7 days. You can return back to work. But if you're unvaccinated and you travel, whether work-related or for personal travel, these are the current requirements from the CDC. So we're expecting to see more updated guidance from TEA as it relates to schools. But for right now, I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. Many of you are still on contract into the summer. And if you're going to be traveling for work or for personal reasons, just know that if you're unvaccinated, that could present an issue with quarantining requirements. All right, moving on, summer programs. I'm really happy to report that we have filled all of our summer positions for summer school. We have a waiting list. In fact, our summer school courses have all made. In fact, they're all full. You're aware that we're paying teachers $40 an hour, or your daily rate divided by the number of hours you work. Whichever is greater is what you're going to get paid. Nurses are also making $40 an hour. And so that was an effort to incentivize you to consider continuing to extend your school year, knowing that it was an unbelievably difficult year for everyone. But recovery starts now for so many of our students. And so we really have to ramp up what we normally do over the summer. And so we're ready to go. We're ready to launch, and we're fully staffed. So thanks to all of you who will be working over the summer, and hopefully the compensation is going to help. Moving on to remote learning for next year. We spent the last couple of months surveying our community, taking applications. Campus teams reviewed those applications, applied criteria for pre-existing medical conditions, academic success in a remote setting this year, and other criteria. And those that were approved, it ended up being 119 students across the district, pre-K to 12. So we actually have much fewer numbers than we expected. In fact, we don't have enough students to make a class at any grade level at the elementary, nor do we have enough students 6 through 12 to make a section at any of those grade levels. And so at this particular point, it doesn't appear that we're going to be able to offer remote learning in the fall. We are still pending legislation that would even enable us to do it should we choose to. But our numbers right now don't seem to justify offering remote instruction in the fall. The only possibility is to enter into a partnership with neighboring school districts. We have been in discussions with Judson and Shirt-Cibolo, who also are seeing very low numbers. And so if that is going to be a possibility, it may be late in the summer before we're able to notify those families that want remote modality for next year. So what that means for everybody on this call is that you'll be teaching students face-to-face, and that's how we're going to open school next year, and that remote instruction of any sort is going to be very unlikely. Moving on to survey, your ThoughtExchange. I just wanted to remind everybody that it closes tomorrow at the end of the day. Sam can put a link in the chat, or of course you've seen several emails from Brandon and Twitter posts, social media posts. We've had some really fantastic participation, but the more the better. Keep in mind that year over year, this is what our board uses as part of their compensation decisions, as part of their decisions around benefits, the decisions they make about some of the improvements they want to make going forward. And that your feedback has resulted every year in some upgrades, particularly to salary and benefits. And so this year will be no different. In fact, preliminarily, we can see that the number one comment seems to be that staff across the district are ready to see the district step up and do whatever they can to improve compensation. We know that the last 2 out of 3 years, we've not been able to give a raise. 2 of the 3 years, we've given a small $500 retention bonus, but only 1 of the last 3 years have we been able to give a raise. And so the board has listened, and the board has directed me to do everything that we can to give a respectful salary increase for this year. And so I'm happy to report that what we will be proposing to the board is an increase to new teacher with 0 years of experience pay up from $51,500 to $54,100. We are going to give all teachers a 5% increase plus a step, which means that in most cases, every teacher will see more than a 5% increase. It depends on the size of your step. The average is just under 6%, it seems, for everybody. In some cases, actually may get even more than that. But it is a solid 5% increase. It's the largest increase that I've seen for teachers in a very long time. In addition to that, our auxiliary employees, we are going to recommend that we increase the minimum, midpoint, and maximum, that we increase our minimum entry-level pay from $10.91 to $12, and then increase our auxiliary employees 5% of midpoint as well. And so it will also be a sizable increase for all of our auxiliary employees. And as far as administrative employees, those on administrative pay grades, we're looking at 3%. So that's what's going to be proposed to the board. They're fully prepared to approve that should we be able to balance the budget. And Judy and the business team are really working the numbers and doing everything that we can to make this happen. And at this point, you could feel very confident that this is what the compensation package is going to include. In addition to that, we've had a lot of questions in the survey about a spring one-time bonus, and we vacillated back and forth about what's going to benefit employees the most. One thing that everyone may not realize is when we give a bonus payment, it's not compensable. It doesn't get included in your salary, and it doesn't count towards your top 5 years for retirement purposes. And it's one time. So instead of the one-time bonus, we pulled all of that money into making the 5% raise possible. And so by doing that, the raise is compensable. It will be part of your salary. It will go towards your top 5 years for retirement purposes, and it'll be a raise that you receive year over year. So it's now included permanently in your salary, and we felt like that was going to be a greater benefit. But that being said, we also know that this year was a tremendous challenge, and that everybody across the organization stepped up. And so what I'll also be recommending to the board is for employees who are with us this year, who were employed with us prior to spring break and are still employed with us today, I'm recommending that you receive 2 extra personal days for you to do whatever it is at your discretion you want to do. If you want to save them until you retire and have those bought back, if you need to use them, you're going to get 2 additional days. And again, that's just for employees with us this year prior to spring break. It wouldn't be for any new employees that were hired after spring break. And of course, that are still with us today. So that's what we're proposing in the compensation package. It will be substantial. And I hope that, it's appreciated that if you see trustees that you thank them. The trustees are also aware that this has got to have to be a multi-year commitment if we're going to ensure that our teachers are beyond the average in the area. And so they understand that and they're committed to that. All other pay grades across the organization with this particular increase are going to be in the upper quartile across the area when compared to other school districts. This will get teachers around the average across the city. So we'll look forward to continuing to make ground in this area going forward. And again, we're very confident that this is something we'll be able to present to the board with a balanced budget, and that the board will be approving this. In addition to salaries, you've probably heard a lot about districts providing huge stipends for teachers. And what you may or may not have read is that that's generally associated with the teacher incentive allotment entitlement program that was part of House Bill 3. SAISD recently advertised their payments to teachers who qualified as master teachers. It's a substantial amount of money. There's a link there that we'll also put in the chat to TEA's slide deck on the teacher incentive allotment. Basically, there's several goals that the agency has, and the first of which is to keep quality experienced teachers in the classroom by giving them the ability to earn as much as $100,000 a year with the additional stipend that comes from the agency if they earn a master teacher designation. The other goal is to incentivize teachers to take on some of the most challenging assignments in the most challenging communities. And some of those oftentimes end up also being some of the most rural communities. And so again, the slide deck there will frame all of that for you. What you need to know is that our district is also pursuing approval of a teacher incentive allotment program. But that if employees come to us with a designation, the money from TEA comes with them with a multiplier depending on how rural we are and what tier we fall in terms of socioeconomic status. So the vision for this is basically that TEA will have a map of all schools in the state of Texas, school districts, and you'll be able to scroll over all of the school districts, and depending on the designation you've received, you can see what your stipend, your additional stipend above and beyond your salary will be if you taught in one of those districts. And so a master teacher in Alamo Heights, for example, is going to make less of a stipend than a master teacher in East Central or SAISD or Edgewood. So that link there is a good, it's a good place for you to get educated on something that we're working on very closely with Region 20 and the Aspire school districts on the southeast side of Bexar County. We're working to accelerate the timeline and hopefully put together a well-designed plan that is fair, equitable, and reliable, and that it has some degree of alignment with districts in our area, so that if one teacher goes from one district to the next, it would be comparable, right, in terms of how they earn their designation. So look forward to that. It's on the horizon. TEA has allocated the funds as part of House Bill 3, and hopefully they'll be able to sustain that, but that's yet to come. All right, so it has been a crazy year. You know, I think of this year as a storm. I mean, we know we had COVID, we certainly had Snowvid. And one thing that we all know, especially in the last few weeks, you know, storms tend to tear up things that aren't firmly grounded, that aren't anchored. And they kind of give us a clean slate, and they leave behind those things that seem to be the main things, right? Solid foundations to build upon. And, you know, this year has reminded all of us, I think, that nothing is either good or bad unless you think it is, right? It's a matter of perspective. And that when obstacles present themselves in our path, that most oftentimes the obstacle is the path. You got to lean into it. That obstacles are to be overcome, and that overcoming obstacles is just a matter of perspective, and it's our choice. Do we want to feel like we're victims, or do we want to feel like we got to lean into this thing and attack it? And, you know, I believe that our organization is not one to fold in the face of adversity. And we don't just endure adversity. From the onset of this pandemic, and like all other difficult challenges that we've been presented with, we thrive because of what we're up against. And this year's been no different. You all know that minus the mandatory closures, that we had no option otherwise but to be closed, the district was always open. The district never stopped serving students, never stopped serving the community, and we managed to do it in as safe a way as possible. Our child nutrition team never stopped working, even when we were closed. And you all know what they did to stand up curbside and home delivery or neighborhood delivery of food. Our custodial team never stopped working. They never shut down. During the mandatory closures, they disinfected. We had contracted services come in and make sure that when we were able to get back into our buildings, that they were as sanitized and safe as possible. Our maintenance and grounds teams never stopped working. They addressed all of our facilities and, addressed all of our HVAC systems to make sure that our air quality was going to be optimized, and that we made adjustments so that air circulation was ensured before anybody entered our buildings every day. Our transportation team early on got into the community with our child nutrition team and delivered food into the community. They also made adjustments throughout the year to make sure that transportation wasn't going to be a source of COVID spread. And they did a stellar job. We had no outbreaks on any of our buses. They also, from a fiscally responsible standpoint and an operational efficiency standpoint, the Department of Transportation consolidated several routes to make sure that we were maximizing the resources we had in transportation to still get a reduced number of students back and forth to school safely and in a fiscally sound way. Our police department never shut down. Our police department was instrumental and has been instrumental in making sure that we're all safe. During Snowvid, they drove the streets. They got into the community. They worked with maintenance to ensure that we minimized the damage and got ourselves back into our buildings as soon as possible. All those groups work closely with EC Water to make sure that we minimize the effects of freezing pipes, et cetera. And then our small but mighty warehouse, Pete and his team, I don't think people realize the small number of staff that are in our warehouse, but the tremendous amount of work they do getting things distributed throughout our entire school district. And so we're very grateful for them as well. I think that we all are pleased that we never missed a paycheck. Our business office never closed. All of the staff in the business office worked tirelessly and in payroll to make sure that payroll happened biweekly and monthly each and every time without fail. Our curriculum and instruction team, all the way back to the onset of the pandemic in March, helped us stand up choice boards and Google Classrooms and quickly transition us into not an emergency model, but an instructional delivery model that was as reliable as we could possibly stand up, and created tons of tools that would enable us to mitigate to the extent possible the daunting task of providing face-to-face and synchronous instruction simultaneously. Our Marcom department has been invaluable. In fact, one of the most consistent comments in parent and community surveys throughout this year has been, we appreciate the transparency. We appreciate the real-time communication and the access to information. And so our Marcom department, I think you would all agree, has done a fantastic job getting information out, being responsive, monitoring social media, making sure that concerns are addressed and that misunderstandings are clarified, and we appreciate them greatly. Dr. Dykstra and his team in technology made sure that we had the additional technology devices that we needed to get to our kids and our households across the community, and that they addressed connectivity challenges and stood up a help desk structure across the organization to support campuses, and partnered with A&M San Antonio to get some additional students in the district who could help us troubleshoot and do tech support. And their efforts were invaluable as well. And of course, our student services and our counselors and our communities and schools partners have never stopped supporting our most needy students and families, going to homes and providing basic needs and monitoring to make sure that kids are thriving and that their basic needs are met. Our risk management team and our benefits team continue to manage our healthcare. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But I hope that we all appreciate what the board did to ensure that we had another option for healthcare, because for those of us who have had an opportunity to visit Dr. Hill at CARE ATC and see what the associated costs were for prescriptions and for copays, I think we all realize that we got a heck of a deal and a heck of a healthcare option right here in our school district. And of course, our teachers, our instructional pairs, our campus administrators, right there in the trenches, right there at the student desk level, doing the work that matters most, have just been extraordinary, have been flexible and adaptable, and have been responsive. We've had an emergency operation management team made up of several folks from all of the departments in our organization that helped us design our reentry protocol, that worked together with Jalen and our health services team to make sure that we knew what the current condition was and what the right adjustments were at the right time to make, so that we could keep all of our employees at work and as many as possible of our students back in school face-to-face. And so last but not least, I think we all know that all of our nurses and our health services team across the district deserve a badge of honor as well. They did an extraordinary job working together with Metro Health, advising all of us, the hundreds and hundreds of contact tracing investigations that they did to ensure that we knew the circumstances and responded appropriately in the best interest of our entire community. Was just extraordinary. Consistent, professional, collaborative, and invaluable. And so what I can say as an organization is we've thrived throughout the pandemic. The evidence is there. And I know that we're coming out the other side of this thing better than ever. Nothing will ever go back to normal. It's going to be better than it was before. We have significant challenges ahead of us. Many of our students did not come back face-to-face. We know that many of our students lost some ground, didn't make the ground that they otherwise would have. And we're going to have to attack that. And we're going to have to attack that in ways that we've never had to before. But at the end of the day, adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it, right? It's cliche, but I believe that our community witnessed our character. And I know that they appreciate what all of you did since last March to take care of them and to take care of their children. And so from my heart and on behalf of the school board, I want to thank you for your service and let you know that what you did was extraordinary and it has not gone unnoticed. And, we're all going to be better because of it. Now, that being said, one thing that I don't think we've all done a good job of is taking care of ourselves. And so the first thing I want to do is encourage you to schedule a well visit with Care ATC if you take the Care ATC insurance. Dr. Hill will spend time with you. They provide services at the clinic that most family practices do not provide. And if you ask your colleagues who have had a chance to visit, I think they'll tell you the same. But our goal here is to make sure that you're proactive with your health and wellness, that you are not waiting till you're sick to go to the doctor, and that we take charge of our health, that we get to know our numbers, we get to know, what those are and set some goals and work together with your physician to come up with a plan of action and execute, because health and wellness is not reactive. It's only obtained by being proactive. And in addition to that, at some point, I'd like to encourage you to turn it all off, turn school off, turn your profession off. Focus on those you love and on doing things you enjoy. And at this point, you deserve to be a little selfish and take care of yourself a little bit. You've earned it. And I'll leave you with this. I've got a 15-year-old, soon to be sophomore, Tyson, who is infatuated with fun facts for the day. I have no idea where he gets them. I'm sure it's on YouTube or something. But he shared 2 fun facts for the day with me this morning. And the first thing was, Dad, he says, fun fact for the day. I said, what is it, Tyson? He says, choose 3 things to be grateful for each day. He said, you know why? I said, why? He says, because if you keep those things you're grateful for at the top of your mind, it is impossible to be stressed, because you cannot be stressed and grateful at the same time. Fun fact. Great advice, Tyson. One of the few times I actually internalized what his fun fact was. Then he goes, I got another one. Fun fact number 2. I said, what's fun fact number 2, Tyson? He says, if you're feeling depressed, Dad, it's because you're living in the past. If you're feeling anxious, it's because you're worried about the future. He says, you need to be at peace, Dad. I said, how do I do that? He said, you got to live in the present. And I think those were 2 fantastic bits of advice from a kid who combs YouTube like all others, who normally doesn't have much very useful, applicable knowledge that he conveys through his fun facts. But those 2 things were very useful, and I thought I would share with you. So I pray that each of you have the opportunity to find some peace this summer, that you get some rest more often than not, and that you do whatever you need to do to recharge your engines, because we have some exciting opportunities ahead. I hope that you have a great summer, and we'll see you all soon. So, Sam, I know that there are some questions that we may have an opportunity to address with the time that we have left, and I'd be happy to do that.
Actually, don't see there are no comments posted or questions or comments.
Okay. Well, again, in the link there, you've got the teacher survey, the ThoughtExchange. It closes tomorrow. So please participate if you've not had an opportunity to do that. And then Brandon, also in the link, the chat there, put the link to the teacher incentive allotment. That's some information you're going to want to get familiar with. That's on the horizon for all of us to take advantage of. And so more information to come there. So if there's nothing else, share this link with any of your colleagues that were unable to be with us this evening. And I hope you have a great summer. We'll see you soon.